And this whole idea of the line of Seth emerged in the 5th century. Celsus and Julian the Apostate used the traditional belief of the angel view of Genesis 6 to attack Christianity, because it's a weird idea. A lot of people rebel at this idea. Angels have it's just unpleasant. So a guy by the name of Julius Africanus resorted to the Sethite theory as a more comfortable way of dealing with the text. He contrived this idea. Well, what it really means is this, It doesn't mean what it says. It means that it's really referring to such and so. And of course, then Cyril of Alexandria used it to repudiate the Orthodox position, because leaning on Africanus. But the real mistake came when Augustine embraced the Sethite view, and because he did, and because of his stature, it became the Orthodox view. The lines of Seth is the view that's, even to this day, still taught about this passage. And thus it became part of the Catholic Church, and it prevailed through the Middle Ages. And most Protestant denominations that derived from the Reformation they dragged this baggage along without re-examining it. And so it's commonly taught today. When I'm teaching you here, you're going to have to do some digging to even come across what's called the angel view of Genesis 6. But the text itself, the sons of God is never used of believers in the Old Testament. That's what the Sethite view would require. Seth was not God, Cain was not Adam. These were daughters of Adam, not daughters of Cain, right? So forth. And there's no mention of daughters of Elohim. There's sons of God, but there are there no daughters of Elohim? What's the point? And there's also some grammatical problems with that I won't bore you with. That gets technical, so we'll move on. And the lines were separated in Genesis 11. That's when that was imposed upon Isaac, not for Ishmael or anybody else, just on Isaac. By the way, if the Sethites were the good guys, right? That's the theory of the Seth view. Why did they drown in the flood? You see, all flesh was corrupted according to Genesis 6, verse 12. So this idea of the Sethite view, as it's called, if you start examining it from a textual basis, falls apart, makes no sense. Now the inferred godliness of Seth is suspect because who was his son? Remember, see, only Enoch and Noah's 8 were spared. Noah and his 3 sons, that's 4 people, and their 4 wives. 8 people in that ark. Enoch's pulled out ahead of time. Those 8 are miraculously preserved in the ark. Well, where are the Sethites if they're such good guys? Remember, the Nephilim took wives as they chose. And why did the Sethites perish in the flood? And by the way, something else you may recall from last session, Enosh, which was Seth's son, is the guy that initiated the defiance of God. He's the first apostate. That last verse in chapter 4 is mistranslated. In the days of Enosh, men began to call upon the name of the Lord. That's mistranslated. They began to defy, call upon idols and so forth. Very important translation, as we talked about last time. Men began to profane the name of the Lord, according to Genesis 4:26. That's the Targum of Angelos, which is in the Jewish community regarded as the translation. The Targum of Jonathan. Kimchi, Rashi, and the other rabbinical scholars all agree. Jerome agrees. Maimonides, which is probably the most venerated of the Hebrew sages of the 12th century, in his commentary on the Mishnah. The point is, the ancient Hebrew sages understood the angel view. That's the main point I'm getting here. And daughters of Cain is the concept. There's not a subset of the daughters of Adam. Cainites were not necessarily godly. Cain, yes, he murdered his brother, but remember how that chapter ends with his genealogy. He names his son with the name of God in it. He was a repentant believer. Yes, he did murder, and yes, he's suffering for it, but his children were God-fearing, apparently, at least some of them. And the other question about the daughters of Seth that they don't have an answer for, were the daughters of Seth so unattractive? Why are the Sethite leadership going after daughters of Cain? What's wrong with the daughters of Seth? Are they ugly, or what's the problem? Anyway, but the unnatural offspring is the final nail in the coffin of the Sethite thing, the supernatural offering. The text implies that the offering, the Nephilim, were the mighty men, the Hagabarim. And to give you an example of one is Goliath. He was a descendant of Anak. Anak was one of the Nephilim. And of course, this whole issue of no chromosomes among the Sethites. There were no women of renown, men of renown, right? No women of renown. And so and then the other question is, what made Noah's genealogy so distinctive that it gets a mention in verse 9? Because it was unblemished. These others were blemished. Now the New Testament, as I point out, confirms this 3 times. In Jude 6 and 7, we looked at that. 1 Peter 3:19 and 20, and 2 Peter 2, verses 4 and 5. So we went through those. Now, the angel view before Christ